screen. Thank you to everyone for joining. First European VMUG of 2021. Happy to be here with everyone. For those who are first-time attendees, Warren and I would like to welcome you. We are your famous co-leaders for the European Virtual Mug Group. I'm Chloe Pott. I'm a marketing operations professional, and I'm a two-time Marketo champion. My first time leading a user group is with this European Mug with Warren that we started this past summer, and multi-time certified. And I'm super honored to be here with Warren to tag team this user group with me. Warren, you want to give a little intro?
Yeah, no, perfect. So yeah, apart from kind of running this EMEA Marketo user group, Michael Tucker, who's also on the call, we kind of do our monthly roundup, and been using Marketo now for like 8 years, well, coming up to 8 years now, I guess. And I have to renew my certification soon, which is exciting because it's the new test. But yeah, I know we've been around for a little bit, and we kind of co-host this. So yeah, good to be here.
So before we dive in, a few quick housekeeping rules. Some of the user group housekeeping rules are on the following slide. So we want to create a safe space that's user focused, where people can ask any questions. It's whatever happens in the user group stays within the user group. We like to stay away from pitching or self-promotion. Let's really talk about our use cases and how we use, whether it's Marketo or other marketing automation platforms. And if the information that we do share within the group, please don't share it outside of the group without the person's consent. Stay in touch, stay connected with other user groups in your virtual community. If you have not yet already signed up on the Bevy platform, there's a link herein on the slide, and you can search for any of the chapters. Right now, everything is pretty much virtual. So you can actually be like Warren and attend all of the user groups if you want to, all over the world. Some upcoming mug opportunities that are taking place. April 2021, the Adobe Summit is coming back on, and it will be virtual again this year. There's a link on the slide. You can learn more. And for the rest of the month of January, you can see on the slide all the other virtual mug events, meetings that are happening this month. There's a bunch of office hour type meetings. I've heard great things about the Japan user group. I haven't attended it due to the time difference, but we're excited that you guys are here with us today to kick off our first group of the year, where we will be talking about kind of one thing that we've learned in 2020 and one thing that we want to work on in 2021. And so Warren and I kind of opened up our network and asked 3 fellow Europeans to join in. And so I'm very happy to have with us today Andrea, John, and Veronica. And I'm actually going to let them give a little introduction of themselves, and then we'll dive into what they learned and what they're going to do for this year. So Andrea, why don't you give us a start?
Hey, hi everyone. So my name is Andrea Calça. I live and work in Portugal, and I am a senior manager of marketing operations and technology in OutSystems, and I run the marketing operations team globally. So my team is really spread in APAC, America, Dubai, Portugal, so everywhere.
Thanks for joining us. And Andrea, you're joining from Portugal,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. All right, John, how about you?
Yeah, hi, John. I'm joining from Amsterdam, though originally from Australia. I've been with Booking.com for a couple of years now and look after the Marketo instance on the supply side, as well as an assortment of a few other technologies that we use to connect to that. And probably talk about this as we go into our 2020 and 2021 things, but also kind of branch into the realm of the data and the marketing data and the activity logs and things like that as well in the past years.
Thanks for joining. Veronica, welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Veronica Lazarovic. I recently turned to consulting, so I work mainly with Marketo. I've been working with Marketo for about 5-6 years. And recently, I also started to work more with Salesforce and other MarTech tools. I am based in Spain. I'm on the island of Mallorca, so truly remote. So super happy to be here today.
Thank you. Let's see, it's not letting me change the slides. All right, so as I mentioned, first user group of the year, we're going to talk about one thing that we learned in 2020 and one thing that we're going to work on in 2021. So I've gathered everyone's thoughts. And so Andrea, this is just a little bit of a cue to lead you into talk to us about what you learned last year and what you're gonna do for this year.
So for me, last year was really important to understand that I am not alone. So the year was really challenged. We need to do a lot of improvements and changes in Marketo in this case. And we need to do all the changes really fast, really fast. So it was important for me to understand that I was not alone because I have a really great and fantastic team. So we are really, we have really different personalities, we have really different scopes and expertise. And we find a way, although we were all of us were working from home, to bring together everything and make the year a success. So it was really important to understand that have a great team with really expertise, different expertise, was really important for me. The second thing that I realized is that I was not alone because we have a community of peers that have the same problems, are facing the same challenge, and you can learn from them. You can learn that what they are doing, how they are trying to solve the same problems that you are. And sometimes you also get a kind of validation because sometimes we doubt ourselves. I am doing the best thing to solve this problem. And sometimes leveraging that community and trying to understand what they are doing helped me a lot, especially because I am in Portugal and we don't have a really strong community of marketing operations in Portugal. So finding those type of communities online also helped me a lot during last year.
It's really insightful. Thank you. Oh, there we go. All right, let's move on to John.
Yeah, so from what I learned in 2020 was a lot more about, it's a bit more of a technical thing than Andrea, but to do with the Marketo APIs and how to use them. There are quite a few use cases that sprung up in just kind of my day-to-day, from either doing some mass deactivations of triggers, that we have many that are related to different events that have passed, to a big project where we have started to extract and store all our activity data internally. And using that, as well as a few different tools that we work with, and doing some custom integrations with them. So having a good understanding of how the APIs work help define those integrations, and how we want them to build and how they're going to work and what to test and things like that. So for 2021, it's kind of building on all the foundational work that happened with the data from last year, but looking to enhance this further in our reporting capabilities. So now that we have all the activity information and data that comes from Marketo, we've got that stored internally. We can join that to different data sources and look to do things like better measure either the kind of inbound calls, if there was deflection from the email, or if it generated inbound calls, or connecting that through to different performance metrics and segments, and looking a lot further down funnel than kind of the email engagements to looking for what we call different implementations of opportunities, for example, or successes in a campaign, whatever that may be for the type of message.
Awesome. No, thank you, John. I also just want to ask a quick question on that bit. What specifically, because I know that it's a technical detail, like what specifically did you try and address with the API that you couldn't do normally? So what were the key things there?
Yeah, one nice example is that we have an event management tool that creates our event programs in Marketo. For that, it works with a lot of triggers. So we have a lot of active triggers when we have in the peak times, about 200 events a month with a couple of maybe 2-3 triggers in each. So then we have a lot of active triggers running that are kind of expired after the events happen. So I kind of like have just a bit of a routine process where I can export from the marketing activities log of the active trigger campaigns, filter out the previous ones and kind of deactivate those en masse. The other bit was just, yeah, as I mentioned, just storing all our activity log data. I think that was also a bit more prevalent when they changed their the expiration of some of those pieces, like the email send and the email delivered activity to, I think it's now 3 months from the 25 months that it used to be. So having records of that internally as well was a big thing that we did.
Yeah, nice. I just wanted to ask about that specifically because it's just a really interesting area that I think a lot of people are moving to. And then obviously the last but not least, we've got Veronica and kind of her lessons as well.
Yes, thanks. I actually had a question for John because I find his topic super interesting as well on the APIs. And I was curious if you use Marketo to send any transactional or operational emails and use APIs for that.
From the event management tool, we're using Marketo to do all the email comms, and that's kind of triggered from there. That's all API driven. It's a lot of testing from there, but then the administrative bits I was just doing through Postman, so I can kind of run them myself. In some cases with the cloning, there was just to test if it was a problem with the integration or the configuration. I was also doing some of the, for example, cloning an event template either through Postman just to validate that the connection with the other tool works the same way and things like that as well. Yeah, I think in summary, some of the transactional emails, but it's triggered from a third-party tool via APIs there.
Cool. Okay, so I'll go. My learning from 2020, I wrote down, life is like a box of chocolate. That's one of my favorite movie quotes, but I think that was 2020. You never know what you're gonna get. Not just for me, for many. In specific, for me, 2020 pushed me in the direction I needed to go on my own. And I transitioned from an in-house role to Marketo consulting. So to give you a bit of background, up until recently, I was working at an enterprise organization here in Spain as marketing automation manager. I had a small automation team, and I've been, part of a large marketing department. But just, during last year, things went very much sideways, especially to companies in the travel space. So working for a company in the travel space, we were severely impacted. And that was the moment for me to reevaluate what I want to do next. So over the summer, I just slowed down with work and thought what I wanted to do. I looked into consulting, and many of the conversations I had with people pointed me in that direction. So late in 2020, I took a leap of faith and decided to go ahead with it. And now I call myself a Marketo independent consultant, and so far it's been really, really great. So it's still very new to me. I'm still super excited, but I also trust that there's a need for people like me in this industry. So I'm happy to help anybody who's thinking about it or answer any questions in the community about this transition.
That's awesome. And then your goal for 2021, you've got documentation. That's a big one, I guess.
Yeah, that's a big goal. So one area where I didn't invest that much time previously was documenting the instance, documenting the processes. So I saw how that can turn into chaos very easily in 2020. So to avoid that, I recommend every time to do documentation. Now, luckily in my role, I've built an instance from scratch just recently. I implemented a Marketo instance, so I know what decisions were made, why and when. So now I need to write everything down. But maybe I can use some advice from you guys, like how to use documentation, do you use any tools? Do you make a big document package?
So I take a different approach to this one. So I record most of my stuff via the Vimeo Chrome extension, so I don't have to take notes. I'm not sure if that's lazy or efficient, you decide. But that's the way I address that. And then I have a decision document. So for every important decision, that's where everything's kept. So it's never a case of arguing, going, hey, wait a minute, you said this within the scope, or this was discussed. I keep a record of when that decision was made, who it was by, and then the details around that. And then for me, it becomes a very easy thing to be like, here's the source of truth. And as well as all of my notes are all recorded, literally, basically. And then I just do it as a transcript, because I just don't write stuff out. And when I do, it's just on this notebook. I don't do it all digitally. So that's my approach to it.
That's a great question, Veronica. The documentation, it was actually one of the things that I want to work on for 2021. But in my previous role, my previous role is documentation. I've always been in-house, and documentation has always been a challenge with frequent rotation within the employees in the team. I've done writing, just writing out step by step what the steps are. I've also done screenshots, but like Warren said, the ones that I find easiest and less tedious to do is just screen record and talk through it. It's not always the best for going back and trying to find things, because you have to watch the whole video. But definitely, I think the easiest is videoing, but maybe more the most productive for onboarding later is probably some sort of written version with screenshots. For tools used, my last company, they used Teams to chat between people, and there's actually a wiki extension in Teams that allows you to have you can make a wiki article. And I actually really liked that for documentation, because you have different tabs for each different tool. Similar to an Evernote or a Microsoft OneNote type tool. Yeah, those are the tools that I've used in-house.
I would also say as well, I love this topic, everything about the documentation, that if you get access to a smaller instance and you can propose using it, Marketo internally, I've trained people on Marketo using Marketo by sending Marketo emails. So you can do an onboarding internal nurture program that will train them Marketo. And then the bonus being is that you can see whether they've read it, right? Because you can see whether they've engaged on your emails and they're taking account. And what's more is that you can use the performance report to suggest to the managers that they might need to pay more attention to the training. So if you want to be really sneaky, that's another way of doing it.
I love it.
That's great. Anyone else have any comments on that before we keep moving down the line?
I think ours is a bit similar for documentation. We've got or kind of run off a Google Sites page that documents kind of all the basics, things like the naming convention, those kind of fundamental bits. Some of the bigger programs that I made this year, I've also made a separate documentation that was a lot of screenshots and explanations. I think for that was just more of the Google Slides format, but it kind of connected through, because I think that also gets the challenge from me anyway, when you start to make more complicated programs in Marketo that aren't from a template and ad hoc to a specific need, where they start to interlink and you say, okay, this smart campaign reference to this and this has reference if it's here, and having that all kind of connected is where it gets a bit complicated for me. And I think that's maybe, I like the idea of the video and maybe doing little chapters of that, and could be a nice way around it.
I like Frank put a comment in the chat, said using animated GIFs. GIF, I don't know what ballpark you're in, but I think that's a great idea, is using that animated GIF to supplement the written wording documentation.
One of the problems that I see with the documentation is that documentation tends to be, is not updated anymore 5 minutes after you created it. So this is one of the problems that I see. And do anyone have ideas, or how are you handling with this problem, or how to keep documentation updated?
That's a good one. I mean, it depends on the amount. I suppose it depends on keeping it nice and organized. But another thing I like to really think about is, because a lot of places are Google House or are on the cloud mostly now, is to make it searchable. So keeping the topic headlines in one document that you can always reference, and then search for particular items within that, particularly as like example John mentioned, which is like all G Suite on the Google Slides. You can search for a keyword and it will just bring up all the slides that have got that particular thing on there. So it's a way to just maybe reference some of those things. And the other thing is just to review it again, and just every now and again to check that you're still, is there something you can do to make that, turn that up to number 11, you know, and really try and amp it up. And now that people are familiar with it, because you really wanted to try and push the instance. Maybe I'm just speaking more as a consultant, but like that's the way that I kind of think about it.
Okay. Honestly, G Suite is not working for us, at all. We are trying to see what is the best solution moving forward, and the reason why is that searching anything on G Suite is really a pain, because we have lots of documentation there. So it's becoming painful for us to use G Suite. So we are trying to find a better solution for it. So we are searching for tools like Confluence, for example, and see if that makes sense for us to adapt. We have that master document, or we start building it, a master document with all the processes. We are doing it for operational campaigns. So our master documentation refers to things like life cycle or scoring. So for problem templates and how you set up a campaign, we have playbooks and we have video training, so people can refer to the video and learn how they would need to use problem templates. So we have different approaches depending on the type of thing that we are trying to document.
I think it's an interesting point as well, that actually everyone will learn differently. And I think as Marketo users, a lot of us will probably like that, just that logic of the step-by-steps of then having to do it. Different to like the HubSpots and Eloquas, where you actually have to, it's really visual and it feels uncomfortable, at least for me. Like, it feels uncomfortable being in a place where you almost have a canvas. I like my logical steps. So you kind of almost assume when building the documentation that has to be nice logical steps. But I like with Chloe, I think you suggested the use of like GIFs as well. There's just like a mini visual associated with that. And that will help maybe remove a lot of the steps that you have, because it's just got it there in the visual and you can be more descriptive. That might be another way of approaching it.
Yeah, that was Frank's recommendation.
That was Frank's, perfect. Yeah.
I think something else, if you're talking a specific campaign that's built for a certain reason, is just using that summary box in the campaign and on the different elements. I think having that, at least then you can have a quick text, the description of what's happening, and without having to look at the flow and be like, okay, this here, and then there's a different decision here, and this happens and points to there. At least you can kind of say, okay, the schedules run 8:30 every day. It's, you know, it needs this one to run before it runs, just as a data processing or something, whatever it may be. Just as a quick, I think I often, you know, maybe it's because of lack of documentation, but I also find that I have to click through programs and kind of interpret them, going, okay, what's going on? How does this all connect? And having that as just a quick summary could also be quite helpful.
Can I chime in for a sec? One thing that I kind of think is interesting, I love the conversation. It's something that I've been trying to get onto and improve in 2020. So I have a comment in there about, you know, Jessica Cow has an old article on nation.marketo.com that has a table of contents for a typical Marketo instance of what you would put in your documentation. But I like the conversation that we're having here about different people learn with different ways. And so the video component I think is interesting. I love to record almost all of my sessions with a client and then repurpose those afterwards. So when we're covering off different topics, with them, then I remember the order of what the conversation is, and I'll go in afterwards and I'll make a note of the time code where we talked about this, where we talked about that. And if you look in YouTube or Vimeo or even other players, most of them have a query string parameter that allows you to actually skip right to the right time code. And you can make those links then afterwards. So in your documentation, you say, well, we're talking about operational programs. If you have covered operational programs with a client in a 1 hour conversation, but it was the last 45 minutes of that conversation, put in the link with the query string parameter directly to that 45-minute time code mark. And then even an executive can just click on that and they don't have to skim through the entire video. They can just go directly to the piece that they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to pick on Frank. He's very active in the chat. Frank, you wrote documentation functional versus technical. How do you do it in your organization? What's your documentation like?
Well, what we usually do is when we're talking about functional documentation, we don't put it in Word documents. We put everything in PowerPoint because it's easier to do with slides. And then most of the time we have like a bi-weekly meeting where we have more the people that are active in Marketo, but also in the campaign territory. We share that slide deck by explaining what it is, and then we usually post the link to that slide deck, which we have on SharePoint to have people look at that. But you would see in our organization is that we have a very compact core of Marketo people. Approximately probably about 25, and we have probably about an additional 110 that actually have access to Marketo, but the 25 more or less take care of everything. And which means that the knowledge that we share within that specific group, they are more or less know everything. And if they don't know, then we usually have a screen share session and then might record it for future prosperity. But that is the, we usually just talk a lot to each other instead of writing documentation.
I mean, I guess it's easier with that core group of 25, I guess, centralized team, and that goes on to, I don't think there's many, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone on the call, where they have a decentralized model with larger teams, so like 100 plus, a decentralized model. I've not really seen that where they're building their own, I say, Marketo programs successfully, as in they're like without checking or checking within the team. I don't know, maybe you guys have that. I think that's an interesting one.
Yeah. Yeah, but how we operate is that we actually we more or less work from a marketing automation center of excellence, which consists of 3 units, of actually 4 units: IT, the digital marketing. It's been renamed so recently, so I have to think about the name. Connected data and analytics, and then we also have what we call the hub. And the hub is actually purely an agency, an internal agency that supports all marketeers around the world in creating programs. But we also have some specialists in different regions which pick that up themselves. But we are really facilitating the rest of the organization, and that's where you see is that the power is really in the center of excellence. And we do see that we have tried to train people in the past, but we have learned that the training that you give, it's maybe a 2-day training, and then they go in maybe once or twice. And then after 90 days, that's the limit for us, that if they don't log in within 90 days, we kick them out again. And then you see that they actually do not come back because their job is not working in Marketo. Their job is to do campaigns. And they do not have the time to really train themselves in using Marketo from a campaign perspective. So they use the hub, which they can just sort of use as an agency to get this done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I had, sorry, Chloe, saying something. Who was saying?
I just wanted to make a comment. I really like the point Frank brought with functional versus technical. And in the past, I used successfully Lucidchart, where I would go and draw the flows and the illustration, also to check myself if it makes sense, and then share with others. And if it makes sense, then we go ahead and build. So I've been doing that at some point.
Yeah, I do the same. I use flowcharts to do sanity checks and also see if other people understand what I'm talking about. Because I think that that Warren also said it in Eloqua and in HubSpot, you do have the visual model of building out your flows, which is not in Marketo. And then sometimes it's very difficult to explain to people how you should use a smart campaign with smart lists. And I think that these flowcharts usually help quite a lot. And most every project I start, but also as part of the documentation, I usually have this kind of flowchart. Which I might not always update, but at least it's a good starting point to at least get everybody in the same direction.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think I was talking about putting it in slides before, and I'd often start with an overview of a flowchart and then kind of highlight each component as I step through like the different smart campaigns that relate to each of the bits of logic in the flowchart.
Yeah.
I think it brings to life what Marketo does, right? Because if you imagine it's difficult now because we're kind of, a lot of us are Marketo admins, I would say, to imagine a situation where you don't know anything about Marketo, and that's what you've got to present to. And so that visualization, I think, helps really puts that in someone's head about what it actually does. Because otherwise it's just a step list, isn't it, of things. So there's that element, I guess.
I think if you start to talk about like an event program where there's different bits triggering off confirmations and reminders, and we may have different smart campaigns for each, then it's, I think, that concept that probably all admins can do, but considering there's different parts everywhere and you have to build this picture slowly, looking through each of the smart campaigns, or create that whole, like, visually create the experience that's built in just a series of kind of lists. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm. There used to be I don't know if it's still around, but there used to be a tool, and I'm probably not allowed to mention name, but I had a bigger contract where they had a couple of million contacts within the Marketo database, and within that they'd embedded tooltips that would take them through the guides within Marketo. It used to be called Pendo.io. They had
Yeah, I was looking into that, Warren, for you gave me a recommendation to use that, and I reached out to them a couple months ago, and it's no longer available for Marketo.
No, Adobe took it away, but it used to be like you could literally program in like when a certain tooltip would go in. So they hadn't logged into 30 days, then you could bring up a tooltip within Marketo. And so it just quietly went away, and there's never been any mention of it, but it's an interesting one.
I think one thing that you can do that's sort of similar to that uses Marketo native functionality is to use the program ID token. And you can actually, one of the things that we're working on right now is to put in, you have drip emails to clients, but you can also have drip emails to internal stakeholders. And so if you put a URL for your actual clickable button and you insert that program ID into your URL, it takes those users that aren't in Marketo every day directly to the corresponding program that you want them to be able to work within. So we're starting to do things like that, which, it's not inside of Marketo, but if you trigger off of some of the different activities for a given internal stakeholder, you can build a lot of those reminder emails and alerts to those people.
Yeah, we were trying to build something similar, not based on what you're saying, but what we're trying to do is use the API to extract the last login date for the users and put that into a Marketo field, and then based on that have monthly campaigns that trigger emails that saying, hey, you've not logged in for more than 90 days. This is the URL you need to go to. And then have that webhook check again if after 10 days, if they did again, send a reminder email. If they did not do then after 14 days, then we'll send an alert email to the admins to remove these people from Marketo. But it's still a work in progress. So now we're just still doing it manually.
I like that one a lot. One thing
Oh, sorry, Michael.
No, that's okay.
I was just going to say that there's just lots of, like, if you can get buy-in to get an internal, like, people into Marketo, I still think there's lots of really interesting things you can do, especially when you don't think about internal, like how am I going to take this core database and train them up and provide a nurture. You could do all sorts of things. Another example, I think maybe someone just mentioned this, but having, like, within your program templates, just literally a landing page guide within there that describes everything that comes with that program template. So it's already embedded into the program template, perhaps. There's another way you could do something like that.
I'm going to bounce off that, Warren. So program templates, there's a lot of chatter about them. And I want to get insight from John, Veronica, and Andrea, who have joined us today. How do you go about building program templates if you're joining a new company, or if you hear of someone who doesn't leverage program templates in Marketo? How do you start? What do you recommend doing?
I can start on this one because just recently I was working a lot with program templates. So what I like to do is go to the library and see what's in there. And I think there are over 30 templates about everything, online advertising, scoring, webinars, one of my favorites, sync sources. And then I like to import them into the instance to see what it is. And often I end up using it. So I personalize it a bit, add the fields that I need, and end up using the templates from Marketo. My favorite one is the webinar. So there's a lot of actions inside a webinar, many campaigns, assets. So I like that one. I also took the push people to the CRM template recently. Interesting moments. I think the next ones I saw in there are scoring and preference center. So I just want to check it out and see the logic that lives there.
So
That scoring program is a great example of how to leverage tokens. I don't know, we recently we redid our scoring program in Marketo. It was not tokenized, so I had to go in each smart campaign and change the point value of everything. And a couple months ago, I tokenized it all on the program level. So which leads me into another conversation of tokens. Let's stay on the topic of program templates and see what other people do at their organizations they recommend.
I can go next. So the way that we have done it is we start a conversation. First, we start a conversation and a discussion with all the teams about channels. Okay? So that was the first thing that we start. So we start understanding the type of channels that we need to have, why we need to have those channels, the type of campaigns and programs that the teams want to build. And when we have that definition, we create from scratch. We did not use the Marketo library. We start creating from scratch a template for each one of the channels. So, for example, if you are setting up a webinar and you are using the webinar channel, you can use a template, predefined template for a webinar. So that was the first approach. So we have a custom template for each one of the channels that we have inside Marketo. The next thing that we start understanding the next level was the type of campaigns that did not fit, or the programs that did not fit those templates. So we have, when we are talking about events or training, we have really specific requirements that we were not able to leverage with the default template. So we also talk with the stakeholders and try to understand all the steps that we need to have on the template, and all the flows, all the emails, everything is there. And again, when we have a program that we know that we will have a lot training events that we do every week, for example, we templatize that. And this is a really custom templates for a specific use case. If you have a one-shot, you can use one of the standards that we have in place. We use a lot of tokens, especially for the ones that are recurring, because the only thing that we need to do is use the tokens and the program is set up.
that's awesome. No, thanks. I guess, like we've discussed everything on the documentation side. Chloe, is there anything you want to kind of talk about on the token side, or what are you thinking?
Yes. So there was a question that I actually gathered from someone who couldn't attend today, but It's a great question about tokens. So they're using tokens for things like first name, last name, company, but they see in their instance, and they've seen through Marketo, that there are tokens for so many other things. Who out there uses tokens for things other than just name, contact personalization in emails? I know, for example, at my organization, we do use some tokens for program tokens and triggers. John, I have a feeling you have something to add to this question.
Yeah, we use also the program tokens. I think there will be some limitations with them, but we do use the program token to get a naming convention that sometimes you put in a URL or like a UTM parameter. That also feeds back into, for example, we have sentiment surveys. It's like, how do you rate this email? And we can at least track back then to a rating to the particular email and the asset that they're rating. Have to be a little bit careful there with often like foreign characters that URLs don't like in your naming conventions. I have to be a bit mindful of that. Also used tokens recently for a wait step and having a date time token. It syncs in from a system. Long story, but because we have events that run globally, the time would sync in and now instance would read as instance time. So then I'd also have the time zone of the event and then do some calculations to say, okay, if it's AEST in Australia, it's 10 hours ahead. So we need to go this time plus 9 hours to get 1 hour before the event for a reminder type bit. If we stored that, I stored that then at a lead level and could say, wait until the lead dot 1 hour before event time. And because it's kind of the process that once they're in that wait step, if I override it for a second event, it doesn't matter because they're kind of locked in that wait step and there. So it's a kind of a workaroundy way that we used tokens as well, but in a flow rather than kind of for personalization reasons. Yeah.
I was trying to.
Go ahead, Warren.
I was trying to find the article. I saw something on recently, how someone has used a velocity script to be able to add emojis in the subject titles within Marketo. So I've seen that article recently. I'll find it out and dig it out. So I've actually, there's no reason, because I'm normally, well, Marketo as a tool, right, it's typically B2B, but you'll occasionally see some use cases for doing that. I know HubSpot have that for default. You can just add those in, but it's an interesting one. In addition to that, I've also got a good velocity script that replaces the ICS calendar token, which will then put in the lobby and everything, and you won't have to download something, which is particularly useful from a Google, for people with Google houses. It literally just gives you that link to add. All of my Google devices are going to go off now, but it will give you like the calendar invite straight from there and push you straight into the Google Calendar, as opposed to having to download an ICS file. So there's a couple of good ones I've seen. I'll be able to share those afterwards.
That's interesting. Seeing who else can I pick on? Michael, you just, that smile. What? Talk to me. Tell me. Give me your favorite insight about tokens.
About tokens, gosh, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. I think I kind of shared my one about using program.id a little earlier on. I thought that was a good one. I think that some of the tokens that people don't think about is, we talked a lot about event programs. I think Veronica talked about that, but that member.event token, and being able to incorporate those into your Marketo workflows. So, you can, a lot of people that I know that are kind of starting out with their first connection to a webinar provider will just use the alerts from the webinar provider. But the benefit to doing that from Marketo is that you get all of that extra interaction and engagement information about how are people using the event invitations and the event reminders for your different webinars. And, because we're all remote now, you can put all sorts of other communication pieces into those reminders from Marketo, a lot more than you could do from, let's say, like a GoToMeeting default reminder or something like that. So I'd make use of that. The other token that I thought was interesting, a fellow user here in the Charlotte, North Carolina, US Marketo user group told me a couple of years ago, they had built out velocity tokens for every single location to personalize the header and all of the branding footers on their emails, because they're the nature of the business, it's kind of like a franchise network. So every franchise location needed a set of personalization that was above and beyond what was in their segmentation rules in Marketo. So they actually built out a scripted token with 50 different if-then type of statements that personalized to wherever the user was located, using the geographic data that they were getting from inferred country values in Marketo. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a really good example of velocity tokens. And now, as you mentioned it, I remember I've been using velocity tokens in a similar way. I think I was working with incentives, and as we are here in Europe, there's so many currencies and so many languages. So we use that bit that states in an email the amount and the currency in velocity. So if country is France, then euros, and yeah.
Sorry, that's my coworker.
I forgot to mention, this is like an office hours discussion. So if anyone who has a challenge that they want to discuss with their instance, please shoot it in the chat. We just got carried away with discussions. We've got a great panel of experts here who can help lend a hand. Warren, you just put it in the chat, the article for the emojis. At my organization, for our customer and partner newsletters, they put emojis in the subject line, like I don't know, I think it's the air horn or something about like the megaphone or something like that. But they did figure out some sort of scripting to put that in there.
Yeah, no, that's the article that I saw. I was searching for it to see where I thought it was an interesting one. You kind of store up these things that you kind of almost want to explore and play around with if you're allowed, sort of thing. Yeah.
I'd say if you get a chance, go to the docs.marketo.com and just type in tokens overview, and that's the definitive list of all the different tokens that exist in the platform. What Veronica was saying there, I think it's system.refer to a friend or something like that. I think that's interesting. I always get an email from people going, how come my Marketo email is not formatting properly? And it turns out that it's because they forwarded the test email to somebody, and then it's getting what's the word, kind of garbled up, I guess. If you forward an email, no matter what platform you're in, it's not going to format the way that you had intended it to. So that refer a friend token is a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some people really utilize as well the kind of parent and child level token. So let's not forget that if you put it at the overall folder structure, then it will just be an inherited token throughout of it. So that's an example of where, because we just changed to new year, like people would just have 2020 in the highest level token, and then basically they'll just change that to 2021. It will just change on all the footer and on all of the programs. Like, I think that's a common use case for where you'd use that. But then it does make it a lot harder for testing if you've kind of got like parent-child campaigns and different things like that, and then people don't really understand why they would receive this test because and where that information comes from. So that always makes for an interesting challenge.
Do you guys use naming conventions in your tokens? Like, you notice in the program templates in the Marketo library, the program library, they'll say email dash from URL, email dash from address, and kind of use that to help with kind of the inheritance and kind of which tokens are located in what campaign folders.
I've started to do a little bit with that for to do with like the source of it. So I'm thinking about now with our event platform that connects to Marketo, and it's populating the token values of event name and things. I could custom call that, so I kind of name that source of it. So I can say, like, it was Splash is the platform, so we say splash event dash title splash event dash start time, just so I know where it's all coming from and all populated. And then occasionally, if there's additional, so I was thinking use cases that I'm kind of looking at the Agile calendar link to put in there. And then one of those attributes is duration. So if I want to put that in, I've got like agile-duration, and that will hopefully, well, the intention is that will be in the base templates every time it's cloned. Default duration will be 2 hours. But if there's a need that there's a specific event that's 4 hours or 1 hour, we can change that just at the token level, and we don't have to change that URL. But then I've kind of, delineated saying, okay, this reference or this is impacts the Agile, and this comes from Splash, and this, so I can at least track back and know what's from where. Yeah.
We also try to use the same naming for the same token in different programs, so it will be easy for the person that is using the token to understand what they need to change on the program. Because we use really a lot of tokens. We use tokens for everything on the templates, since the header of the email until sometimes we have customized CTAs that we use tokens so they can personalize on that specific program. And the way that we are doing this is that we use the same name across all the programs, so people are used to know what they need to change on that specific token.
I think definitely having a clear naming convention, not just in tokens, but in everywhere, your program names, the way that your programs are built, I mean, all the way over into your CRM. And the one naming convention that I've always wanted, but never had the courage to put in place, so if anyone has any tips on it, please let me know, is file image uploads in Marketo.
I get this. We had a nice framework. So our email templates had all different sizes. You'd have like a leaderboard one. You'd have, sometimes it was like a speaker image, which was like a 200 by 200, something like that. So we had a spreadsheet that had kind of a mapping framework that said, okay, if it's a speaker image, these are your dimensions. So everything we then uploaded was like speaker image dash. So we'd at least know what size everything was. So it was all consistent with, so we had each spot named like kind of display ads, leaderboard and things like that. So then we could always be like leaderboard dash, and you'd always know that your leaderboards are that image. We also then took a screenshot of the name. So we'd have also the link to that image and then a screenshot of the actual image in a separate sheet, because I'm sure, as you know, Marketo is not so friendly for browsing. You can't look through and we get a list of links. So then we could browse through our other sheet and go, okay, that's the one I want. Here's the link, just paste it in. So we really, after uploading to the media library, we never really went back in to
That's
find.
a good idea, because I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I've done a search in our instance, and I just want like to pull in our company logo, but it's like company logo 1, company logo 2, company logo _, and they're all different sizes, and it's
The last one.
Start with your template, understand the sizes that fit there, and then kind of name like the prefix everything with that image space.
Mm-hmm.
I am working at this moment on a naming convention for forms and trying to find the best one because we have really different names on forms, and it is difficult when you look for the form to identify the type of form, the type of fields that you are asking. You need to preview the form. So we are trying to find a way of, through the naming of the form, and we be able to identify for what you need to use that form and the field. So we are at this moment working on that and trying to find the best way of doing it. So if anyone have ideas or suggestions that can share, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I remember that one thing I did regarding forms is to put a form ID in the name of the form.
Yeah.
We use that one because the integration that we have with our website, the only thing that they call is the form ID. So we really need to have that one on the name to be easy. That one is a good one also. Thank you.
Maybe
sorry, another one I do on forms is I work in Europe, so in EMEA, so I put the language, so ENFR initials, I put that in. And I also have split my forms into two, one which are called T1 or T2. T2 is marketing qualified leads, and tier 1 is marketable leads. So basically, it's only 2 levels at the moment, but that works quite well in knowing where the person is in the funnel and which country they've come from, or language, sorry, or which is their preferred language.
Great.
That's an interesting point.
Maybe
Actually,
even
that.
in the, sorry, Michael.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that and just thinking, you know, what some of the things that you can do within the rich text form labels is interesting. And I saw a session that Veronica Holmes in Australia did actually just about what they do. They have done incredible things with some of their forms by just using some of those rich text fields, and you can put all sorts of HTML, and I believe you can put tokens in there as well too. I got to double check that, but it has the same editor that you see in a rich text block. So you know, what can you do from an opportunity standpoint with those labels if you put in a token for English, a token for a different language, and you have those kind of pre-populated, right, as to what's available for you there. Like I don't have the definitive answer for that, but think of your forms beyond just being able to kind of put in static forms and static labels, and what you can do with some of that HTML blocks that are in there.
All right. I hate cutting conversations short, but our dear Warren needs to run to another meeting, and he's the host of the Zoom link. So if he leaves, everyone leaves. Yes, we will be sending out a recording once we get it up on here's a little shameless plug for Michael and Warren's YouTube channel. There's a YouTube channel for all the Marketo user groups. And we have a specific playlist for each mug. So we'll upload this one to the European VMug channel, and we'll send it out in an email. But thank you everyone for coming. John, Veronica, Andrea, I really appreciate you guys sharing your insight. And until next time, Warren and I are going to try and get another meeting together, probably for March. I think it's going to be a more technical based conversation. We alternate our mug meetings from strategic discussions to more technical how-tos. So once we figure out that topic, stay tuned, and be happy to see you all with us again.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.